So, hello everyone, my name is Ykaterina Baskakova and I'm working with Dr. Dagmar Divjak on her project sponsored by the British Academy. So today I'm going to give you a talk about frequency in language and how we can use the insights from linguistic research to learn languages. Frequency is the best indicator of human behavior. What you do often, you do better. This is because repetition freezes a behavior into a habit, something you can use without thinking, like swimming, riding a bike, driving a car, speaking your mother tongue. That's right, speaking your own language is also a behavior that is sensitive to frequency. Children learn words that they hear often sooner. A child's first word will typically be something they hear a lot, like mommy, daddy, teddy. Adults read and recognize high-frequency words sooner than low-frequency words. Sometimes when you read a word that you do not use very often, you might accidentally replace it with a word you do read often. You might have caught yourself reading blue when it says blur. Words that are used often are also more vastly represented in memory. You might have experienced this yourself. When you talk in a very noisy environment, like a pub or a club, you find it easier to understand words that you hear often, and when you read a text and some letters of a word are covered with coffee stains, for example, you find it easier to decipher high-frequency words than low-frequency words. The good news is that we extract and register this very important information on how often we hear a word automatically. We don't need to do anything special for it. We don't need to remember to do it. We don't need to pay attention to the words we are tracking. Linguists have developed theories on how we acquire our languages just by relying on frequency of occurrence. So it is a very important mechanism. And it is also active when we try to learn a foreign language. So if we want to rely on frequency when we learn a foreign language, it is very important to understand that frequency effects are memory effects. Frequency has the effect it has just because our memory is very sensitive to how items are presented over time. And the memory capacity of our brains is very powerful, especially if we know what it likes and doesn't like. For example, our brains cannot store and recall lots of information in a short period of time. However, our brains are very good at storing information that we encounter regularly. If we encounter it regularly, it's probably because it's important for our life. So it would be really smart to pay attention to it because it will help us survive. So there is one more thing you need to know before we move on and look at how we can use insights from linguistic research on memory and language to help us learn another language, and that is that memories are not stored as discrete files in one place in the brain. When we learn something, memories are not stored in a single place, but are scattered across many different regions of the brain. So the memory is something that we call an emerging feature of different parts of the brain firing in a certain way. And this network should be built up and strengthened over time with practice. It's a bit like developing the stamina and the muscle mass when you need to run a marathon. So now let me proceed to the memory hacks you can use to learn languages. You've probably all experienced that cramming words before a test may get you a pass, but soon after you realize that you have forgotten most of the words you learned. This is actually because you don't really learn anything. Cramming or mass practice is it promotes accessibility. That is, it makes certain information accessible, but only for a short period of time. Distributed practice, on the other hand, promotes availability. It makes information available whenever you need it. This is because distributed practice is based on the spacing effect. Retention is better if learning is spread out more in time. So, adopt a study schedule that will make you practice a little every day and includes ample time for the consolidation of your new words. Without consolidation, newly acquired memory traces are more susceptible to being overwritten by the new input. You might think that you know 10 new words, but adding another 5 will make it seem that you already forgot the first 10. It's a bit like the doctor and the apple. A little a day keeps forgetting at bay, and sleeping on things really helps with consolidation. Learning and remembering are active processes, so be active. But being active when you learn a language doesn't mean that you need mindlessly copying words. If you write something 100 times, it will not help you with remembering it for long, just for a short period of time. Information needs to be processed mentally, not just physically, and organizing the information really helps with that. You can turn the words you need to remember, for example, into a story, especially if it is a story that you can relate to. Instead of staring at a list of emotion words in Spanish, try to take pictures and describe people in them using Spanish emotion words. Making meaningful connections, especially connections that relate to yourself, produces much better learning. And putting things in context, this is because memories form better with deep, meaningful processing. And meaningful processing is made easier if you don't look at parts in isolation. Putting a new word in its correct form into a meaningful context will produce better learning. And putting words in context also creates lots of meaningful clues that are handy if you want to retrieve a word from memory. This works in two ways. Try and remember and mentally recreate the situation in which you used or heard the word. If the conditions at retrieval correspond to the conditions at encoding, retrieval becomes easier. So, for example, if you are being tested on football terminology in German, it will be easier and helpful if you remember the last football game you watched in German, and make sure you actually watch one before your test. It is not procrastination, it will you learn these words. And another way is to try and study under different mental and physical conditions. The more situations you have used this word in, the more situations you can rely on to help retrieve. So if you learn, for example, words for different kinds of food in Russian, then bread will be easier to commit to memory and retrieve again than baked beans, for example, because you eat bread basically with everything in Russia, and baking beans are hardly ever on the menu. So when somebody tells you, would you like some bread, it will be easier for you to remember this than when someone tells you, would you like some baked beans. So retrieval cues matter, and if you have stored a word but you cannot access it, it's of a little use to you. So structure your environment such that you have ample cues to make a memory accessible. And practice retrieving those cues. Testing yourself will help you to retain more information than simply rereading this information. And finally, there is something that is called meta-memory. use it. Practice conscious control over your learning environment and monitor things you have already learned and things that you still need to know to help you guide your learning process in a better way. You should focus on the things you know the least well, not the things you know best. And try to focus on those words. So put aside your memory cards with words that you already know and try to focus on the words you don't yet know. Thank you very much.